Hello, welcome to Ekate's Crossing as we continue with James Redfield's Secret of Shambhala. We up to chapter 1, so let us continue with that. Firstly, we do the Siddhartha Tarot. Sorry, what's wrong with me? Siddhartha Tarot, and with, whoa, cards that flipped out. Here we have Five of Pentacles. Five of Pentacles to me is that sense of acknowledging I just get the words of acknowledging the poverty within the world. And I'm not talking finance. I'm not just talking finances. I'm talking about that sense of the poverty of the way that people live. You know, they can be rich in money, but still have poverty in their life in the way of love or moving forward, you know, opening their heart to other possibilities is what I'm getting there. I'm getting sort of more about, you know, that poverty, acknowledging the poverty in our own lives. And I'm not talking finances, I'm talking about the way that we do our things and having a breakthrough and understanding of that, to be able to have that new beginnings. Oh, God. Okay, so I got 4 cards here. I get the King of Cups, and I get that sense of being kind, being generous. I think that's very, very important about being kind and being generous is what I've got here. And I got the Three of Pentacles in that sense of, yeah, I get the words expansion was quite strong here. So I say it's an expansion in wealth in your life, and the way that you sense of recognizing the skills and abilities that you have, supporting others, you know, being able to support others in their journey is quite important here. So I get that sense with these cards here. We're looking at with the I get that sense of acknowledging the poverty that we may have in our own lives. And I'm not talking, like I said, I'm not talking about money and things here. I'm talking about on a global sense in our own lives, and the way that we might react with people, or the way we might manifest what we desire in our lives in some way, that sense of the challenges that we might need to overcome. So we've got poverty in the way that we might live our life, right? And so we've got this breakthrough, this understanding to move forward on our journey. And it may come from the sense of being kind and being generous to others. Quite important here to be kind and generous, but don't let your emotions get the better of you. It's not about being too emotional. To me, this is very much about just being kind, being generous, but not over gushing it is what I want to say. Is don't over gush it as well, and to be able to support others on their journey to expand and to grow. So what an interesting reading that is. So let us continue with the James Redfield, The Secret of Shambhala, chapter 1, as we continue this chapter 1, Fields of Intention. Back at home, I found myself totally distracted. What was that all about? I stared at my desk, unable to concentrate. Later, I took a long walk and a swim in the creek, finally deciding to call Bill in the morning and get to the bottom of the mystery. I retired early. At about 3 a.m, something woke me. The room was dark. The only light was seeping in around the base of the window blinds. I listened intently, hearing nothing but the usual sounds of the night, an intermittent chorus of crickets, the occasional drone of bullfrogs down by the creek, and far away the low bark of a dog. I thought about getting up and locking the doors of the house, something I seldom ever did, but I shrugged off the idea, content to let myself ease back into sleep. I would have faded away altogether, except that in my last sleepy glance around the room I noticed something different at the window. There was more light outside than before. I sat up and looked again. There was definitely more light coming in around the blinds. I pulled on some pants and walked over to the window and parted the wooded slats. Everything appeared normal. Where had that light come from? Suddenly I heard a light knocking behind me. Someone was in the house. "Who's there?" I asked without thinking. No answer. I walked out of the bedroom and into the hall that led to the living room. thinking about going to the closet and getting out my snake rifle. But I realized the key to the closet was back in the dresser drawer by my bed. Instead, I carefully walked on. Without warning, a hand touched my shoulder. "Shh, it's Will." I recognized the voice and nodded. When I reached for the light on the wall, he stopped me, then walked across the room and looked out through the window. As he moved, I realized that something about him was different from the last time I'd seen him. He was somehow less graceful, and his features seemed completely ordinary, not slightly luminous as before. "What are you looking for?" I asked. "What's going on? You scared me half to death." He walked back towards me. "I had to see you. Everything has changed. I'm back where I was." "What do you mean?" He smiled at me. "I think all this is supposed to be happening, but I can no longer enter the other dimensions mentally the way I could. I can still raise my energy to some degree, but I'm now firmly here in this world." He looked around for an instant. "It's almost as though we didn't, in understanding the 10th insight was just a taste, a preview, a glimpse of the future. Like in the near-death experience, and now it's over. Whatever we're to do now, we have to do right here on this earth." "I never could do it again anyway," I said. Will looked at me in the eye. "You know we've received a lot of information about human evolution, about paying attention, about being guided forward by intuition and the coincidences. We've been given a mandate to hold a new vision, all of us. Only we aren't making it happen at the level we can. Something in our knowledge is still missing." He paused for a minute and then said, "I'm not sure why yet, but we have to go to Asia, somewhere near Tibet. Something is happening there, something we have to know." I startled. Young Natalie had said the same thing. Will walked back to the window again, peering out. "Why do you keep looking out of the house?" I asked. "And why'd you slip into the house? Why didn't you just knock? What's going on?" "Probably nothing," he replied. "I just thought I was being followed earlier today. I couldn't be sure." He walked back towards me. "I can't explain everything now. I'm not even sure myself of what is happening. But there is a place in Asia we must find. Can you meet me at the Hotel Himalaya in Kathmandu on the 16th? "Wait a minute, Will. I've things to do here. I'm committed to..." Will looked at me with an expression I've never seen on anyone's face, but his a pure mixture of adventure and total intent. "It's okay," he said. "If you're not there on the 16th, you're not there. Just be sure if you come that you stay perfectly alert. Something will occur." He was serious about giving me the choice, but he was smiling broadly. Excuse me. I looked away unamused. I didn't want to do this. The next morning, I decided I would tell no one where I was going except Charlene. The only problem was that she was on an assignment out of country, and it was impossible to reach her directly. All I could do was leave her an email. I walked over to my computer and sent it, wondering as I always did about the security of the internet. Hackers can get into the most secure corporate and government computers. How hard it would be to intercept email messages, especially when one remembers that the internet was originally set up by the Defense Department as a link to their research confidence at major university. Is the whole internet monitored? I shook off the concern, concluding that I was being silly. Mine was one message among tens of millions. Who would care? While I was on the computer, I made travel arrangements to arrive in Kathmandu, Nepal on the 16th and stay at the Himalaya. I would have to leave in 2 days, I thought. Barely enough time to make preparations. I shook my head. Part of me was fascinated with the idea of going to Tibet. I knew that its geography was one of the most beautiful and mysterious in the world, but it was also a country under the repressive control of the Chinese government, and I knew it would be a dangerous place. My plan was to go only as far with this adventure as felt safe. No more getting in over my head and letting myself be pulled into something I couldn't control. Will had left my home as quickly as he had arrived without telling me anything more, and my mind was full of questions. What did he know of this place near Tibet? And why was an adolescent girl telling me to go there? Will was being very cautious. Why? I wasn't going a step beyond Kathmandu until I found out. When the day came, I tried to stay very alert through the long flights to Frankfurt, New Delhi, and then Kathmandu, but nothing of note occurred. At the Himalaya, I checked in under my own name and put my things in the room. then began to look around, ending up at the lobby restaurant. Sitting there, I expected Will to walk in at any moment, but nothing happened. After an hour, the idea of going to the pool came to mind, so I hailed a bellman and found out it was outside. It'd be slightly chilly, but the sun was bright, and I knew the fresh air would help me adjust to the altitude. I walked out the exit and found the pool in between the L-shaped wings of the building. There were more people there than I would have imagined, although few were talking. As I took a chair at one of the tables, I noticed that the people sitting around me, Asians mostly, with a few Europeans scattered about, seemed to be either stressed out or very homesick. They frowned at each other and snapped at the hotel attendants for drinks and papers, avoiding eye contact at all cost. Gradually my mood began to decline as well. Here I was, I thought, cooped up in one more hotel halfway round the world without a friendly face anywhere. I took a breath and again remembered Will's animation to stay alert, reminding myself that he was talking about watching for the subtle twists and turns of synchronicity, these mysterious coincidences that would pop up in a second to push one's life in a new direction. Perceiving this mysterious flow, I knew, remains a central experience of real spirituality, direct evidence that somehow deeper was operating behind the scenes of the human drama. The problem has always been the sporadic nature of this perception, comes along for a while to entice us, and then just as quickly disappears. As I looked around the area, my eyes fell on a tall man with black hair who was walking out of the hotel door, heading straight for me. He was dressed in tan slacks and a stylish white sweater, and carried a folded newspaper under his arm. He walked along the path through the lounges and sat at a table directly to my right. As he took out his newspaper, he looked around and nodded to me, smiling radiantly. Then he called an attendant over and ordered some water. He was Asian in appearance, but he spoke in fluent English, with no detectable accent. When his water arrived, he signed the ticket and began to read. There was something immediately attractive about this man, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. He just radiated a pleasant demeanour and energy, and periodically he would stop reading and look around with a wide smile. At one point he made contact with one of the crabby gentlemen directly in front of me. I was half expecting the sullen man to look away quickly, but instead he smiled back at the dark-haired man, and they began to engage in light conversation in what sounded like Nepalese. At one point they even burst out laughing. Attracted by the conversation, several other people at nearby tables became amused, and one said something that created another round of laughter. I looked out on the scene with interest. Something was happening here, I thought. The mood around me was changing. "My God," the dark-haired man stammered, looking at my direction. "Have you seen this?" I looked around. Everybody else seemed to have returned to their reading, and he was pointing to something in the newspaper and moving his chair around to get closer to me. "They've released another prayer study," he added. "It's fascinating." "What did they find?" I asked. They were studying the effect of praying for people who have medical problems, and found that patients who received regular prayers from others had fewer complications and got well faster, even when they weren't aware that prayers were being said. It's undeniable proof that the force of prayer is real. But they also found something else. They found that the most effective prayer of all was structured, not as request, but as an affirmation. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said. He was staring at me with crystal blue eyes. They set up the study to test two types of prayer. The first was just asking God or the divine to intervene to help a sick person. The other person was to simply affirm with faith that God will help the person. Do you see the difference? I'm still not sure. A prayer that asks God to intervene assumes that God can intervene, but only if he decides to honour our request. It assumes that we have no role except to ask. The other form of prayer assumes that God is ready and willing, but has set up the laws of human existence, so that whether the request is fulfilled depends in some part on the certainty of our beliefs that it will be done. So our prayer must be an affirmation that voices this faith. In the study, this kind of prayer proved to be most effective. I nodded. I was beginning to get it. The man looked away as though thinking to himself, and then continued. "All the great prayers in the Bible are not requests, they're affirmations. Think of the Lord's Prayer. It goes, 'Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses.' It doesn't say, please can we have some food, and it doesn't say, please can we be forgiven. It merely affirms that these things are ready to happen already, and by faithfully assuming that they will, we make it so. He paused again, as though expecting the question, still smiling. I had to chuckle. His good mood was so contagious. Some scientists are theorizing, he went on, that these findings also imply something else, something that has a profound significance for every person alive. They maintain that if our expectations, our faithful assumptions are what prayer work, then each of us is beaming a force of prayer energy out into the world all the time, whether we realize it or not. Do you see how this is true? He continued without waiting for me to answer. If prayer is an affirmation based on expectations, our faith, then all our expectations have a prayer effect. We are, in fact, praying all the time for some kind of future for ourselves and others. We just aren't fully aware of it. He looked at me as though he had just dropped a bombshell. Can you imagine, he continued, science is now confirming the assertions of the most esoteric mystics of every religion. They all say we have a mental and spiritual influence on what happens to us in life. Remember the scriptures about how faith the size of a mustard seed can move mountains? What if this ability is the secret of true success in life, of creating true community? His eyes twinkled as though he knew more than he was saying. We all have to figure out how this works. It's time. I was smiling back at this man, intrigued by what he was saying, still amazed at the transformation in the mood around the pool. When I instinctively glanced around to the left in the way we do when we feel someone looking at us, I caught one of the pool attendants staring at me from the entrance door. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away and began to walk back along the sidewalk that led to an elevator. "Excuse me, sir," came a voice from behind me. When I looked around, I realized it was another attendant. "May I serve you a drink?" he asked. "No, thank you," I replied. "I'll wait a while." When I looked back towards the man on the sidewalk, he was gone. For a moment I surveyed the area looking for him. When I finally looked over to my right where the dark-haired man had been sitting, he was gone too. I got up and asked the man at the table in front of me if he had seen which way the man with the paper had walked. He shook his head and looked away curtly. Okay, that's it for me for today. Don't forget to check the links down below. Check the links on my channel. Like, subscribe and ring the bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. Take care and blessed be.